The primary driver of muscle growth when it comes to building muscle is going to be training intensity, right? You need a minimum threshold of training volume, and then you need training intensity, right? According to the scientific data, and I don't know how deep you want to get into hypertrophy training, but the basics of it is you have three categories in your training that dictate how you structure your training plan. Training frequency, how often you train. Volume, how much training, how many sets and reps you do. And then training intensity, how much resistance, how much force production or force you resist within a given workout, right? How hard you're pushing the muscle, right? So there's a balance between those things. Now, training frequency is important because the more you train a muscle or the more frequently you train a muscle, the more opportunity there is to engage in muscle protein synthesis of that particular muscle that you train. Muscle volume basically is extending the load or the duration of how much you train that muscle, how much stimulus you apply to that muscle. Training intensity also is a stimulus thing, right? So basically, what you can do is what I would rather people do is dial back the volume and frequency and increase the intensity. The reason why I default to this is because um, a priority on recovery is more important than the training itself. So if you're very ambitious, you really want to build muscle, you're like, I'm going to train 5 days a week, 6 days a week. Sure, that's great for maximizing muscle volume, frequency, but it's not great for maximizing recovery. So if you're not recovering from your training and you're just running yourself into the ground, you may be working against yourself. You could be preventing yourself from gaining muscle mass or even causing yourself to lose muscle mass. If you were to scale back to, instead of training 5 or 6 days a week, maybe you scaled back to like 3 or 4, and that would improve your recovery and thus improve your results as far as building muscle, right? So according to the scientific literature, you need what, like around 3 to 6 sets a week to either build or maintain muscle mass. In order to really grow a muscle, right, you need more so a minimum of 10 sets per week or like 9 sets per week up to like 30 or maybe even above 30, right? I subscribe more so to a total collective volume of at least 30 sets per week, right, of training volume if you really want to build muscle mass. So what that looks like is, let's say you train 3 days a week, but you do 10 working sets of training volume per workout, right? That's enough to build muscle mass. And it's enough to ensure adequate recovery in your training. Right? So then you have to factor in, okay, so how do you know that you're adequately building muscle, right? What's your goal? Is it to build 1 pound of muscle per month, 1.5, 2, or more? So if you don't have that number factored out, it's very difficult to say if you're gaining muscle real fast or slow, right? Because you have to define what the terms are. A good rate of muscle growth is like 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of lean mass per month. So within a calendar year, you can gain anywhere from, like, let's say 12 or 18 pounds of muscle mass within a year, excuse me, right? So, like, let's say you're 150 pounds and you said, okay, I'm going to take an entire calendar year or at least 9 months out of the year to try to maximize muscle hypertrophy. So I want to go from, let's say, 150 to 162 or even 165 by the end of the year. That's a good goal, right? And let's say your first year, you go from 150 to 162 or 165. That's a success. That is a successful year of muscle mass building. And that is enough to create a body transformation. It is very noticeable in the mirror. Your second year, you can build on top of that. So you can maintain that 162, 165. And then in your second year, you can close out that year at 170, 172, right? Or 175 in that second year. And then your third year, it could be like 178, 180, something like that. So every year, if you dedicate several years to muscle hypertrophy, I would say within 3 to 5 years, you can get really, really close to your genetics, to your genetic potential, right?
Amazing.
A collective total muscle gain would be somewhere around 24 pounds of muscle mass in your lifetime. You can gain about 24 pounds on average.
Amazing.